I propose that we just start to work through the sessions that we had during this week. And this order is obviously corrected. So from this, we will go through the order more or less how we had the Splinter meetings. For each of the summary of the Splinter meeting, we have allocated about 7 minutes. And in this time, we ask you to give an overview on the highlights from the Splinter meeting and introduce the recommendations. So in this sense, I would ask the first Splinter, Markus, or not. I think Markus will give it.
Yep. Thank you, Rolf.
Okay.
And yeah, first of all, thanks everyone who attended our Splinter session on Monday and made it such an active and vital event. And secondly, I want to personally thank Ryan, Wolfgang, and Pat, who dedicated a lot of their time and work in the last weeks and months to prepare the session and also these recommendations. So let's hop in. So we had 130 participants within our session from all around the world. And yeah, we used a bit of a different approach this time, and we used an online poll called Menti to ask participants to answer a series of questions on the future direction of the IGS infrastructure. And 80% of the attendees participated and contributed almost 3,400 responses. So climate change, hazard monitoring, and the emerge of telecommunication standards were identified as key social and scientific drivers that will impact the future direction of the IGS infrastructure. There was also strong agreement that the existing network needs to expand to better support the generation of IGS products and community needs. There was strong desire to implement modern ways of accessing the IGS data, for example, using APIs, and investigate a more cloud-native approach to data storage. And there was support to investigate a higher tier of data center, which will be in the recommendations, and I will explain later on. Key issues identified. So there is no set of minimum requirements that a global data center needs to comply with. So there's a global data center that doesn't accept file uploads from station operators, for example. A lot of data centers don't have any kind of file checks. So they just take the file and put it into the archive, which is obviously not a good approach. Information security is underestimated and needs to be continuously addressed. So also data centers, for example, there are a lot of data centers that use still unencrypted protocols. And I think we need to do a bit more of an outreach engagement and explain what information security actually means and how we can improve it. And we need to improve on a fully multi-GNSS network, since only 150 of the 512 stations track all signals, so also dual frequency beta 3. So major accomplishments. So these are basically the recommendations from the Wuhan workshop. So we could implement that GFZ provides weekly positions for all IGS stations, thanks to my colleagues. The next recommendation was for CDDIS only. So they provide a tarball now for the 96 high rate data files per station. We created the data center coordinator position. We moved away from Z compression for the data to gzip, products are still outstanding here. We integrated the MJAX campaign directories into the main GNSS directory structures prior to 2016. And we integrated the MGAX data into the regular GNSS directory structure. Also here, products still outstanding, but Oliver and the Multi-GNSS working group will have a recommendation on that later on. Changes to the charter. So the role of the infrastructure committee chair changed to a coordinator role last year, and the data center coordinator role got implemented, as you heard before. So let's come to the actual recommendations from this workshop. So following the input from the community at the 2022 workshop, we want to develop a roadmap to enhance the IGS tracking network to meet the shifting user needs. So that includes building network diversity. Also, that includes outreach and engagement to areas where we have network gaps, and capacity building, basically. So we want to build this roadmap in the next 6 to 12 months. And in gray, you also can see the direct alignment to the 2021 plus strategic plan. Number 2, we want to advocate for the importance of information security across the IGS to improve the resilience of the infrastructure and increase trust and confidence in our data products. So that can include basic risk assessments and questionnaires on security. And we want to provide case studies to show what can happen if we get an issue here. So also here, timeline is 6 to 12 months, development plan, and of course, continuous review since security risks don't go away. Number 3, we want to explore modern standards, data storage and access methodologies to improve the fairness of the IGS data and metadata. So that includes exploring cloud-based storage formats, APIs, and of course, the implementation of GeoDSML across networks and different databases. Here we anticipate 6 to 24 months. Number 4, we want to develop a proposal to investigate a higher tier of data center, probably called a global data archive, which would set the mandatory requirements such as quality control, data synchronization, and some form of service level agreement with the IGS. Here also the timeline, 1 year to 2 years. And last but not least, we want to actively engage with all working groups to support them in accessing the data and products needed to succeed with their objectives, which will be ongoing. And what we need to do in the next weeks and months is that we need to determine dedicated action items with priorities for each work package, basically. And we need to implement some kind of continuous tracking of progress. Okay, so major purpose in the IGS is to coordinate, sustain, and enhance the global IGS infrastructure to ensure the community has secure and easy access to the highest quality multi-GNSS observation data and accurate station metadata. Possible impediments that might be in the way of fulfilling our goals is the voluntary nature of the IGS infrastructure, which presents a risk to the continuous availability of data, limited resources, which is funding, staffing, and everything that plays in this category, and also getting the community to support realizing its recommendations, which is also not so easy from time to time. Okay, and the last 2 points, I sent an email to the IC mailing list to ask what the public should know about the IGS. And yeah, one statement is if you search for independent data and products all around the globe for all 4 global GNSS systems, the IGS is definitely the right place. So do support our activities. And also that the public was more aware of the huge effort that goes into providing the high quality IGS data and products, and that the IGS wouldn't exist without their volunteer member organizations. Okay, that's all from my side. And if you have any questions, please go ahead.
Yeah. So thank you, Markus, for this nice summary of this session. Are there questions to Markus? I don't see any. Then thank you, Markus, for your work and also for this summary, and good luck with the next steps working on these recommendations.
All right, thanks, Rolf.
Then the next presentation comes from Artur on the antenna Splinter session.
Thank you, Rolf. So I'll see if I can manage to start the presentation. Okay, should be now in full screen. So basically we had our, good. So we had our Splinter meeting on Monday. It was quite good attended. We had over 100 participants, at least at some time when I looked it up. And we could discuss quite some topics, and most of those topics also ended at the end in terms of recommendations. So in order to go through the highlights what we had, I will more or less go directly into recommendations and point out a bit what it was about the recommendations. The first highlight was, of course, the discussion about the IGS-20 Antex file, which we will have to create then for the ITRF 2020 and the IGS realization. And there, the big discussion, of course, is what to do with the MGEX extension. As most of you are aware, the IGS-20 exists or contains basically GPS, GLONASS, and Galileo. Nevertheless, in particular for multi-GNSS applications, of course, we would like also to include Beidou, RINEX, QZSS, satellite patterns into the Antex file. For this, basically, one recommendation is that we would like really to extend the IGS-20 Antex file once it comes out with Beidou, RINEX, and QZSS. And for this purpose, we will use at the beginning, at least, to use the disclosed satellite antenna patterns which are provided by the system providers if they're available. Luckily, we have to say that for Beidou and QZSS, we have actually the satellite antenna patterns or phase center offsets, so we really can include them. Nevertheless, we have to say that the phase center offset, in particular the set offset, which is correlated with the scale, might have to be readjusted for those three systems in a later step where we can look at it and see how well it fits with the ITRF 2020 scale. The second point, which goes about the IGS-20 Antex file, is on the one hand that we have the phase variations, in particular for GPS, GLONASS, which were basically estimated from the ground network, which goes to another angle up to 14 degrees. However, in order to support LEO POD applications, we need to extend them to 17 degrees. This is be done similar in a way that we have done in IGS-14 Antex already. The extension from 14 to 7 degrees will be taken over from the IGS-14, or currently in case for block 2A satellites where we don't have any patterns yet, we might just use the last value to extend it, and in a later step, we will then replace the extension part by real estimations. In addition, export for the Beidou, TRNS, and QZSS extensions. For QZSS, we have azimut-dependent values, so there is not needed, but for Beidou, we will just use 0 patterns as the beginning, as we don't have yet agreed on a common phase variations patterns for Beidou, which have not been disclosed. This was the first discussion, one to, I would say, the most time. The second part of the Splinter meeting, we were discussing on the one hand side, the how to handle the receiver and antenna names, which are currently stored and maintained in the IGS receiver antenna database. And there we come to our recommendations to say the listing of receiver and antenna names and Amtex entities shall be restricted. Only geodetic antennas and receiver shall be added if the corresponding antenna pattern is provided. Secondly, for coordination purpose of antenna and receiver naming, we will also add entries for antenna calibration facilities and regional networks which are somehow connected to the IGS to make sure that everyone uses the same receiver naming and antenna naming scheme. This is just kind to make the database and the workload a bit less. This additional point which we also discussed was the discussion about the Amtex format. As most of you are aware, the Amtex format is quite old and it makes it quite big, in particular as we cannot have one pattern from multiple frequencies, so we have to duplicate it. Therefore, we really see the need of an update of the Amtex format, and this resulted in the recommendation. The IGS Antenna Working Group acknowledges shortcoming in the current Amtex format and the need for a new antenna calibration interchange format. A new format shall be developed either as a major update to or a replacement of the current Amtex 1.4 format. What will exactly, which will be done, this will be a discussion within the antenna working group. And the last point, which was shortly discussed, is the IGS antenna working group, basically the project RINGANT. This ring antenna calibration, the idea is that we have 4 or something physical antennas which are passed from calibration facility to calibration facility, and each facility calibrates those values in order to make the calibrations comparable. And therefore we come to the recommendation that the IGS Antenna Working Group Project RINGANT is a crucial part of the antenna calibration, comparison, validation activities. Within this project, the selection of different tests shall be exchanged among the participating antenna calibration facilities, allowing to compare the resulting antenna. So I think this project is quite crucial and quite important for us. And it also mentioned that the leader of this project has now been changed. So we're hoping that this project will be ongoing and we will get the patterns. And with this was the major point which we discussed, and with that I come to end.
Thank you for this summary on this interesting session. And this topic is very important for us because it's the basis for our analysis. Are there questions to Arturo on the reports or to the recommendations? I don't see something, and we can move on. The next one would be Andrzej reporting on the Ionosphere Splinter meeting. Not sure whether you are able to share your slides.
Okay. Rolf?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Please, the floor is yours.
Yes. The presentation is visible or not? Hello?
All fine?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Hello, everyone. Ionospheric Splinter session was on last Monday, and we had around 45 participants. And we first of all presented during this session progress related to last Wuhan Iono recommendation. And first of all, we show progress related to real-time ionospheric global ionospheric maps IGS products, and especially 2 centers from Chinese Academy of Science, Ningbo Wong and Manuel Hernandez Pajares, showed the first real-time TEC global ionospheric maps combination. And also Yuri Czerniak show current status, but especially extension ROTI polar maps towards equator region, low latitudes and southern hemisphere, until from North Pole until South Pole. And currently we have some proposition related, of course, after pilot project, maybe in very close future we'll have also full products related ROTI fluctuation maps. And also Adam Froń and Kasper Kotulak from my team show cooperation IGS Ionospheric Working Group with two organizations, URSI COSPAR IRI working group. IRI, it is International Reference Ionosphere working group, and International LOFAR telescope organization, and also Manuel Hernandez Pajares in his presentation related the contribution of UPC to IGS Ionospheric Working Group show also usage vertical TEC global ionospheric maps to the storm index GIMS, and also usage TEC global ionospheric maps as a reliable source of TEC gradient information, and influence of the temporal resolution in TEC GIMS performance. Okay, and first of all, we would like moving toward real-time and multi-constellation ionospheric product. Currently, we start from vertical TEC maps, but also in very close future, we think about real-time ROTI fluctuation maps, and in the end about scintillation IGS Iono products. Related to each topics, we publish, and members of Iono working group publish many papers, and for example, you can see number of publication, but I pass all documentation and also in this presentation to governing board, to Myra, and in this presentation I pass all details related publication. And related to recommendation, first of all, we would like continue work of IGS real-time service for global ionospheric maps, because currently we have the first solution, and during 1-2 years we would like to continue work to better performance of real-time TEC IGS products. And also we think after pilot version, we think about ROTI fluctuation maps related to low latitudes around equator, and also for southern hemisphere. And maybe after pilot phase, maybe during next IGS workshop, we can approve the extension as official products. And after, also, of course, we think about real-time ROTI fluctuation maps. We would like also continue cooperation with IRI and international LOFAR communities. And in this point, I would like to thanks IGS real-time working group, because we very close and cooperate with this group related real-time Iono products. And I think from my side, next info related to document and strategic plan, I pass this info to governing board. From my side is everything. If you have question, I can answer.
Yeah, thank you, Andrzej. It shows again how active your working group is. It's all time impressive to see the progress that you made. Are there questions to Andrzej?
Rolf, maybe I would like also, sorry that I disturb, I thanks to real-time Iono working group and members this group, but first of all, I would like to thanks my associate analysis center from Europe, from Bern, Rolf, from Barcelona, from UPC, from ISA, from GPL, from Chinese Academy of Science, from Wuhan University, NRCan, of course, GPL, but also I would like to thanks CNES Iono Center for contribution to real-time Iono products, and I think also that in very close future also this center will be next 9th center in Iono working group collaboration and products. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Are there questions to Andrzej? I don't see any. So from this, we can switch on to the next working group report from Oliver on multi-GNSS pilot project, MGEX, or multi-GNSS expansion. What MGEX is standing for? Yeah.
Give me a second. I'm just trying to load the screen.
I can try to speak longer, Oliver, if you want.
Yeah.
To
Give me a
introduce
second.
you.
What's going on? Okay, I'll share the full screen maybe.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, cool.
Can you see?
Now you can start. It's all
Okay.
there as it should. Thank you.
Okay, our session for the multi-GNSS working group took place on Tuesday. I admit that I have been overrunning by 50% the allocated time slot, for which I apologize, but the discussion was lively. I tried to save some time now and skip directly to the discussion and recommendation slide. In the discussion, first of all, there was a general agreement to complete the full integration of MGEX products into the standard directory branch, basically a leftover recommendation from the Wuhan workshop that we could not fully pursue during the Corona time. Then we had various discussions on the satellite metadata format, which was generally accepted in its current form, and we just briefly discussed possible extensions. The feasibility of these additional items like clock type, box wing model parameters or so has to be assessed, but the current contents appears to be well received by the user community. Concerning the support of a GPS L1, L5 product, there was a general understanding that this could be useful, but there were varying opinions regarding the proper approach. We basically have the choice to provide this in a high resolution bias file with varying offsets between the L1, L2 clock and the L1, L5 clock, as opposed to the possibility of using a dedicated L1, L5 clock product. And time has to, and further discussions have to see what is the preferable approach for the community. Finally, we had a lively and I admit controversial discussion on the need for coordination and harmonization of the different activities regarding product combination, both orbit and clock and bias within different IGS entities, and the range of supported constellations for such a combination, whether it should first focus on the GPS GLONASS Galileo case as used in REPRO 3, or whether it should be the full multi-GNSS constellations. The recommendations were unanimously to relocate all MGEX products to the standard IGS products repository, and that has already been, promoted with Pat and Marcus, so that they can take action to do that in the individual data centers and coordinate the work with them. That's nothing that the MGEX working group has to do themselves. Thanks, Pat and Marcus, for taking care of that. Secondly, it is proposed to request the governing board approval for the satellite metadata RINEX file format and product as a, standard product of the IGS. I think it would help to have the government approval so that this is something that users can really rely on in the future. Third, it was proposed to establish a task force that works across the individual entities of the IGS to define and implement the toolchain for multi-GNSS product combination and to establish a final operational product or multiple operational products. This task force should be composed by all the, entities that have shares in this work, and we will start calling for such a task force right after the workshop next week. Finally, it is recommended to study options for supporting the upcoming GPS L1, L5 user community, particularly aviation and space users, through dedicated IGS clock or bias products. That's it from my side. If there are questions, feel free to ask now.
So thank you for this nice summary. It was really open.
And for being short this time. And for being short this time.
Exactly. This is what I wanted to end. Zoe has a question to you.
Yeah, I have a question to Oliver, my friend Oliver. Is there any progress in asking the other providers than Galileo to provide satellite metadata as Galileo did?
Not really. Contacting the providers is very hard. Say QZSS is, by the way, the first provider that opened up metadata. They have continued to provide such data for the new QZS-1R satellite, particularly with respect to radiation pressure modeling. We have no active support from Beidou. Galileo, I think, has not released anything qualitatively new compared to what they have done before. They added the parameters for some of the newer satellites and some information on non-gravitational force model sneaked into the public literature, but this is not, say, an official publication by ESA or USPA. So progress is limited. Likewise with GPS-3, Lockheed has tight bounds to what they are allowed to publish. It's a creepingly slow process.
Okay. Thank you.
But I may say that, sorry, it's not directly related to metadata, but we are hoping to make progress in the support of the SLR community for tracking of the entire Beidou 3 constellation. That's a process initiated half a year ago, still ongoing, but we would hope that this contributes really to the geodetic use of Beidou 3.
Yeah. Thank you for this initiative. Are there other questions to Oliver? If not, then we can move on to Thilo on TIGA. Looking at your background, I have the feeling it's not tide gauge, but mountain something.
Yeah, but it's
just explain, Thilo.
Yeah, it's at least a GBS station. Okay, thank you, Rolf. You see already my screen?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Still see the mountains, not the tide gauges.
Okay.
Right, now it becomes better. Now we see your PowerPoint.
Perfect.
And if you make full
okay.
now it's working.
Yeah, fine. Thank you very much. It was a tight gauge benchmark monitoring working group, and of course, we have been in parallel to the multi-GNSS session, which was quite a good thing or a bad thing, whatever you read it. But in the end, we had a 49% and 49 participants in our session. It's quite a good number. I just put here a few names. We started with different talks. The first one was by Gary Mitchum. He is the chair of the CLOS group of experts, and therefore our second endorsing body for the TIGA working group. That was the TIGA working group was established in 2001 by the IGS and the CLOS community. We had different presentations by Guy Webbelmann about the estimates of vertical land motion from multiple solutions, and the difference between the solution and what does it mean for the tight gauge or for sea level community. Benjamin just showed the results of the GFZ Repo 3, and we had a presentation, or it was some PowerPoints I showed from Elisabeth, our TIGA network operator, about the status of the Zonel database. We had in the beginning, we had these key issues defined. There was a review of the status of the TIGA Repro 3. We have two contributions, one by University of La Rochelle and the second one by GFZ, and there was a discussion whether this coverage is sufficient for the needs of the sea level community. And the next point was also that whether we need a dedicated TIGA combination, because, for example, the Repro 3 dedicated TIGA solution from GFZ is not part of the final solution from the IGS. Also, the University of Luxembourg will provide a solution later this year. And then there was a discussion about the situation with the leveling. We have, of course, we have the GNSS side, where we have the GNSS antenna as a reference, but on the tight gauge side, we have the tight gauge benchmarks, and we both need to connect them. The major accomplishments during the last years was that we had this reprocessing campaigns participated quite good with a couple of hundreds of points for the processing, and we have with the Zonel data center, we have quite a good participant and service provided by the colleagues in La Rochelle, providing interface to our data, also displaying the results from the processing of the GNSS reports, which makes it quite easy for users to select and download, and also to study the time series. There was a discussion about whether we can provide a better support to the non-IGS users and non-GNSS experts, especially with help with comparing the solutions we have from the different senders. Also the discussion about the combination of that, and also the outreach to the sea level components, where we could do significantly better than in the past years, but it's mainly was also due to the COVID pandemic, where we have not been able to travel and go to conferences. We had this discussion because Gary Mitchum was there about the cooperation with the CLOS group of experts. There will be a next meeting, likely September or October, where we can meet with the sea level community, and also this is the conference where the TIGA working group reports to the sea level community about the progress. Then it's also that Gary Mitchum is also the president of the Commission on Mean Sea Level and Tides of the IAPSO. That's also an IOGG component, and these are the forum for the larger sea level community, also for the mean sea level and not only the tight gauge community. And we have discussed how we can better provides the service, and there is also a work going on that they will establish a working group on GBS and GNSS, where we will contribute and make a redefinition of what the sea level community is needed from the IGS or from TIGA. There was also a request by the IHO working group on tides, water, and currents. They have asked us to provide a how-to for how to connect the GNSS with the tide gauges. And the Central Bureau offered support, and also the working group offered the support to develop such a guideline for that. And also we had the discussions that we need, we had this labeling of the TIGA observing station, but we need to rediscuss what the label should really be, because we have the IGS course guidelines where we have the part covered, which is more on the GNSS side, but we need also to have the guidelines to reflect this way between how to come from the antenna reference point of the GNSS antenna to the tide gauge 0 of the tide gauge of the tide gauges. And there we have contributed also to the IOC manuals, especially number 4 in the past years, where we have laid down the requirements, and we would like to continue to discuss it and advance this. Impediments is, of course, we see a decline of number of GNSS tide gauge stations, as also with the IGS network or the global GNSS networks. We have many legacy receivers which are delivering only GPS only or RINEX 2, and it's quite hard to convince the community to convert their stations to multi-GNSS or even delivering RINEX 3 data, because they have established routines, and they are not so much interested in operating a GNSS station. They are more interested to have a control of their tide gauges. And we have this problem that we need to connect the physical side, what is the mean sea level, with the geometrical side, which is provided by the IGS network, and we need this leveling, and we still have more than 50% of the stations without any leveling information. And of course, we have only 2 solutions for the REPRO3 from the TIGA, and we need more groups for helping us the process to get more solutions for the analysis. Recommendations, we did not yet really drafted it, but it is a requirement that the non-expert community needs the guidelines how to understand the products of TIGA, also of the IGS, what is regarding the jumps, drifts in station coordinates, and also the non-congruent GNSS side time series from the individual solutions from different centers. And there was one folio what the public should know about the IGS, and it means for the sea level community that the IGS is providing really essential frame for studying sea level rise. Without a long-term stable reference frame, we cannot really talk about sea level rise of 3 or 4 millimeters a year, especially if you live in the Fennoscandia, where you have uplift, or in Indonesia, where you have really subsidence. And it's also the IGS is providing quite a good service with the orbits and also with a ground network for providing interface for the radar altimetry for the orbits, so that we have the sea level time series. And the GNSS is increasingly used from the tide gauge community for the benchmark, establishing benchmarks. Like in the 2 pictures I showed you, on the left-hand side, there is a GNSS antenna, even if we have now buildings around that which had not been present during the installation of the tide gauge. But on the other side, due to the subsidence, the benchmark is quite submerged and hardly visible in the landscape anymore. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Thilo, for this comprehensive overview. Are there questions to Thilo? I don't see any. And thank you, Thilo, for this overview on this working group activities. And we move now on to Tim with the report on space vehicle and orbit dynamics working group meeting. Tim? I cannot see him.
Are you talking Tim Springer, or he didn't show up?
Okay. Then we postpone this. And move on to Cheryl for speak on Troposphere working group meeting? Also
Yep.
from.
I'm here. I'm just pulling up my my thing here. Let's see. I'm going to share the screen. Screen one.
It's coming.
Make it nice and big. Do we see my presentation here?
Very nice.
Cool. Let's see if it works. It didn't work last time. Thanks, Ralph. All right. Hi, everybody. I am the Troposphere Working Group Chair, Cheryl Byram, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what we talked about on Tuesday. All right. Session information. I led the group. I'm from the U.S. Naval Observatory, if you've never met me. When I looked last time before I started the group going, it looked like we had 50 plus attendees. I believe there was somebody from Central Bureau who actually got that number, but regardless, thank you for everybody who is participating. We had an excellent discussion and group that came up with some recommendations. All right, so discussion highlights. We had two presentations from a couple of our Troposphere working group members. The first one was from Jan Dusa about real-time troposphere monitoring at GOP. And the second one was from Jonathan Jones about GNSS metrology at the Met office. And here I put in a couple screenshots of slides from their presentation, but they both gave excellent presentations. So it was very difficult to pick a slide to be on this here to represent what they discussed. After we went through their presentations and had some discussion on what they showed us, we went on to a regular working group presentation and discussion where we talked about updating the Troposphere working group charter. I decided IGS workshop wasn't the best place to discuss that. So we're coordinating that through the mailing list. And if you're in the on the mailing list, you probably already got that email about looking at our charter for updates. I gave a brief update of where the final Troposphere estimates are currently, what their status is, as well as a few updates that have happened over the past couple of years. And then we talked about what updates and recommendations we'd like to the final Troposphere estimates, as well as in the group in general. So I'm just going to jump into recommendations. I was told we had 5 minutes, so our recommendations basically turned out we want to start testing out some different models for the Troposphere in the final Troposphere estimates. We use GeoMF currently. We'd like to start testing VMF, but there's concerns with the discontinuities between the 6-hour releases. So we may end up investigating other avenues as well if it turns out that those discontinuities are an issue in the final Troposphere estimates. We'd like to participate in the Repro 3 reprocessing. We sort of decided that Repro 2 was not, the clocks for Repro 2 were not suitable for reprocessing the final Troposphere estimates for Repro 2. So we're going to investigate how Repro 3 is looking and its suitability for Troposphere reprocessing, but we would like to participate in that. So we'll start that reprocessing and testing and evaluation of the quality. And then finally, as the IGS would like to start moving towards multi-GNSS, we thought as a group, yes, we'd also like to start moving towards multi-GNSS. So we'd like to start testing the production and the quality of including multiple constellations in the Troposphere product, trying to evaluate which of the combined observations are suitable and of good quality for the Troposphere if we need to evaluate individual constellations inclusions. That is something we're going to have to look at. And then finally, I'm not going to read this slide, but major purpose in IGS and the greater geodesy community. I put up here our current working group goals from our current charter, but as I mentioned before, we are working through updating that charter, but here they are as they are now. That's all I had, Ralph.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl, for this report. Are there questions? it seems not to be the case. All seems to be clear. Or Andre, you have unmuted yourself?
No, I was just getting ready to present in case I'm the next one.
Okay, Tim joined in now. I think then we still finish the the Tuesday before we start this Wednesday.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, then Tim, can I ask you for your report?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry for being late. I was actually caught up in the
work.
work.
Don't see your slides yet. Now it's coming.
Yeah, can you see them?
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Okay, so this was the session on the space vehicle orbital dynamics. I didn't manage to put the name of the session yet. So Rolf, Florian, and me sat together on reporting on this session. So the discussion highlights were that the Repro 3 results show significant improvements compared to Repro 2. So many thanks to the ACs for putting a lot of effort into that. Direct orbitons clearly improved, a significant reduction of systematic orbit differences, much improved behavior of the set geocenter and ERC. But we also see that new satellites pose new challenges. So we have some GPS block trees which have shown up during the reprocessing in the last couple of years. And of course, Galileo has entered the picture. We see significant issues with both of those. And we will make the presentations available. They're actually on the Google Docs drive, but I'm not sure if we can make them available in another more convenient way for people. Maybe I can put them on the working group page. The key issues of this working group are and remain the reduction and ideally removal of the orbital periods in the GNSS time series. As Paul showed yesterday, there are still very significant draconical signals in all the IGS products. We should have a look, as Rolf presented there, in handling of the ERP rates. This should be able to be done more better, as Gerhard Beutler presented in 2016. We should revisit that. And clearly we have to improve the new satellites. Emerging ideas, this is something Alison wrote in the chat and I managed to pick it up. So GNSS space vehicle orbit dynamics capacity development. Share and compare orbit models. So different groups are doing different things. It would be good to have a central resource documenting that and making the necessary information available. At least make a central depository of relevant publications and models. There are lots of activities going on. Maybe some kind of coordination between that could be a good task for this working group. ERP file format harmonization, Rolf pointed out that despite that we have kind of a format for it, it's not a very strict format and people put different things in there and we may need some more digits for some fields. And attitude output in orbit format for all ACs. It's already being done, but not all ACs do it. Major accomplishment was in the highlights. Changes to the charter is something we will review soon. Try to get this working group a bit more active. The recommendations. So clearly the improvement of the orbit modeling of the GNSS satellites in the operational products, in particular the GPS block trees and the Galileo FOCs. But we should also look into the remaining GNSS satellites and bring them to a similar level. Some of the work done in the multi-GNSS or presented in the multi-GNSS session showed that, for instance, by DAO, there are big discrepancies, which are clearly or most likely also coming from orbit modeling differences. And also an idea is for the next reprocessing is to downweight satellites which are behaving poorly, for which we know why they behave poorly and that they're really hard to model. For instance, we had GPS satellites with attitude thruster firings because they haven't had no more momentum wheels. Also some GLONASS satellites which have some interesting features and problems. And Rolf showed that downweighting those really helps to improve the results. on such days. And develop, share, and compare GNSS orbit models and try to push that forward. Maybe also get more information from the system providers on what the satellites look like exactly, and harmonize the attitude models. And that's where I would like to stop.
Thank you, Tim, for this report. Are there questions to Tim? This seems not to be the case. So thank you for your work in this working group, and try to keep it active, even if it is not typically not the most active working group of the IGS, but the results are important for the quality of the results anyhow. Then we have—
I will do my best.
Yeah, thank you for this effort, Tim. Next report comes from Andre on the real-time Splinter meeting. Andre,
okay. Yes. Should be coming up now.
It is up, please.
Okay. So the real-time working group session took place on Wednesday, and it was co-chaired by myself and also Manuel Hernandez Pajares, who volunteered to do this. I want to be very brief and just show two slides. One shows the agenda. So we started with a review of our activities since the previous workshop, and it turned out that we addressed almost all the recommendations from the previous workshop in Wuhan. So there was a lot of progress, and some other activities went even beyond these recommendations. We had 4 very interesting presentations on scientific use cases of real-time products from 4 different presenters on Ionosphere, on Troposphere, and also on disaster monitoring. And I believe that these presentations really inspired the audience for the brainstorming that we did for items for a roadmap for future IGS real-time activities. So instead of really discussing the roadmap during the session, which would, I believe, been difficult in that format and in the limited amount of time, we did a brainstorming of possible ideas for the future. And when we will finalize this roadmap in the upcoming teleconferences of the real-time working group. We are leaving the workshop with 3 recommendations. The first one is to extend our IGS SSR format with messages for GNSS satellite attitude, and the signal reference point to center of mass offsets. The projected timeline for this is 1 year. The second recommendation is to define an agreed format for the RMS map of the real-time vertical tech product, and to also start broadcasting this. And we try to do this over the next 3 years. And then, as I've already mentioned, rather short term, until the end of this year, is a goal to define a roadmap for our future activities, and use the feedback from the virtual workshop for this. So this is already the end of my presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Andre. To summarize this discussion from 1.5 hours into 5 minutes. Are there questions to Andre? Remarks? Okay, then we arrived already on Thursday. This is the summary. Yesterday, the first session was from Shangui on PPP ambiguity resolution. May you report on this session, please? There he is. I don't see him. it seems that he is not in the meeting.
No, I haven't seen him arrive yet either.
Okay. Then we can jump over to the next one. I think Tom will give the report on the ACC reference frame meeting, or Salim or Paul.
Yes, it's going to be Tom giving the report.
Okay, then please,
share my
Tom.
screen. And
yeah,
we of course have, they're actually doing work on our building, and they're sitting outside my window at the moment with music playing. So hopefully that doesn't come through too much. Okay, so we had our session meeting yesterday afternoon. It did run long, and there was lots of things to discuss. And it is the combination of the reference frame working group and the analysis center coordinator group. So under the reference frames, one of the interesting things that came out of the Repro 3 processing was the new analysis center at TU Graz, which is using a one-way data processing technique using all frequencies available for multi-GNSS. They seem to have much higher precision than all the other ACs, and that's not understood yet why that seems to be the case, and there's going to be investigations of that. Between Repro 2 and Repro 3, we have seen large reductions in spurious periodic signals, but they still exist there. And based on the periods, it looks like it still has some issues with orbits, and maybe even some ocean tide modeling issues left. Those will be investigated. There is still this drift in scale and a difference in scale between GNSS and the other space geodetic techniques. What is rather interesting is that the Block 3 satellites, for which we have calibrations for the PCOs and the Galileo spacecraft, those are actually consistent with each other. But that is about 4 millimeters different from the scale that's coming from the ITRF at the moment, ITRF 20. There's a small scale rate of about 0.1 millimeters per year in effective heights. And again, that's very clearly seen in the time series of GNSS, but not totally obvious why it exists as we go through. And there's some other issues in scale there. Again, one of the standard problems we have is antennas being changed, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. And so one of the things is to start investigating potential in situ antenna calibrations, either absolute or relative. So an absolute would be potentially matching it with a directional antenna, for example. In terms of next generation of station installations, sort of less environmental error sources around the site, like growing vegetation, is always a big issue. Potentially having multiple antennas at each one of the stations, so that at any one time, only one antenna at a time would be changed, would be a really nice installation. That's sort of actually happening in the VLBI community with dual telescopes being implemented. And trying to limit the equipment changes at the reference frame stations. And the real fundamental problem there is that as we try to upgrade into GNSS, a lot of the old GPS antennas don't have the frequency range. And even changing something as simple as the filters and the preamplifiers in an existing antenna, we've seen discontinuities happen when that happens. So that is a blend. Trying to keep the stations running without end changes is sort of the aim we have at the moment. With doing the new Antex file, which gives the PCO on the spacecraft, which will be consistent with the ITRF 20 scale. And that is planned to be finished and published by July 22nd of this year. So those are reference frames, analysis center coordination, Repro 3, there is combined multi-GNSS orbits and clock products for the Repro 3 system, generated by the analysis center coordinator in GA Australia in collaboration with Wuhan and NRCan. And that will be published very shortly. We want to sort of look at the more quality of the repro 3 results. So far, they've all looked very good, but there are some anomalies that still need to be investigated. IGS is moving towards a multi-GNSS, full multi-GNSS operational system. And so at the moment, there's some thoughts of having a task force which will sort of bring us to a complete version of that. In particular, BDS, where there's still issues with the satellite metadata and calibrations, but bringing BDS into as a global GNSS system would be useful. We are working on a document which outlines how a group can become an IGS analysis center. We have one group in Japan at JAXA and GSI, which is doing that at the moment, and we're using that as sort of a template as to how best to have that go ahead with time. The recommendation number 5 has to do with the IGS being a center of figure system and looking at how we deliver products for PPP users that will actually give them a center of figure frame, given that our orbit files are typically generated by integrating in an initial reference frame with the origin at the center of mass of the Earth. So how precisely to deliver products to the PPP community that are consistent with the center of figure is still being a little bit debated. And we have to do the coordination between the analysis centers and the data centers for long transition to file names. And that's going to happen as we transition into the IGS 20 system. So the current plans for that transition is that we will have a trial period between August and September using basically parallel processing with the current IGB 14 standards and the IGS 20 standards. The IGS 20 products will be all done with long file names, which will actually avoid confusion, which will be useful. And then the plan at the moment, and coordinating with the other space geodetic techniques, is to do a switch in October of 2022. The exact date is still to be determined. And that was the output of the that session.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. It's impressive how you have managed to bring 2 hours of discussion on 2 slides. Are there questions to Tom? It seems not to be the case. So thank you for this summary. Okay. And now Mike Kuhlman is somewhere arrived meanwhile, so that he can give his report on the clock product Splinter meeting.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, let me see if I can share. Do you see the slides?
Can you switch to full screen, please?
Yes.
Very nice.
Okay.
Please.
So thank you for accommodating my shift in time here, no pun intended. I had multiple meetings this morning. This session occurred early in the workshop. It was one of the early ones on Monday. So a number of the things I'm going to talk about here were actually points that were raised in other working group meetings that we felt would be worthwhile for clock products to discuss. So this is kind of an amalgamation of things I've collected over the week and not just things that we talked about on Monday. We had about 100 to 110 participants at that meeting. And I'm of course not going to list them all, but listed here are the current working group members, some of whom were present. Not all, some of them were also had to go to the infrastructure committee meeting, which was happening simultaneously. The key things that we discussed were largely points that we had at a working group meeting in March. And I used that opportunity to really update the broader community on what we had been working on. So the 3 large things were the multi-GNSS clock combination that has largely been the work of PPPAR in Wuhan. But we are working on getting that together with the ACC and getting updates from the timescale to get that pushed out. We have updates to the clock RINEX file format. It's becoming a ClockX file. And we had a discussion on that file and a number of things that we think it can be used for, in addition to some modifications we're thinking about making. And finally, I had a brief presentation on our finalized statement on the leap second that was approved at the governing board back in May. So perhaps if I had to cite a major accomplishment, this is really an accomplishment again of PPPAR, but it's certainly something that's coming down the pipeline in clock products that will be valuable for us becoming multi-GNSS organization here. So the product, the combination has been worked on by Wuhan, and the PPPAR working group generates a number of different products. The key that we care about a lot in clock products is that second file in the middle, the CLK file, but there are also bias files that come out in a combination summary. Although as the week went on, we learned that it's important to link these two together. At present, the combination contains about 260 ground stations, 77 satellite clocks. Of the ground stations, we have 84 atomic standards, which are valuable to help us maintain stability, and 4 UTC case sites to help maintain time. And the final step for completing that, which is ongoing right now, is the generation of the clock exchange by way of the timescale. The other large accomplishment we've had within the working group over the last year was finalizing the leap second statement. The key statement at the end of that, I put that up top here, is that the IGS recommends that additional leap seconds not be added to UTC, citing a number of points that we had made. Among the more important ones is that there's just so many things to track with leap seconds. And in particular, leap seconds are not consistent from one GNSS to the next. The inclusion of certain number of them differs depending on which system you're looking at. So it would be easier on us if it was not going to be changing over time. So discontinuities can also create difficulties in hardware and firmware. So that was another reason that it's not particularly desirable. I can say this, given that other meeting I was in this morning was the consultant meeting time and frequency of BIPM that just finished. And the thing that's moving forward a lot in that community, and I'm not sure if this will actually be taken up with UTC, but is to consider this other resolution where UTC and UT1 will still be tied together somehow, but there will just be a larger value that will create the trigger limit at which some kind of adjustment will be made to UTC. It's not clear where that's going to go. It has a very long road and timeline. I expect that changes to UTC will not be coming in the next 5 to 10 years at minimum. Emerging ideas that came out while we were having discussions, this is mostly on the file update and the product update for clock products. A key update was for having some link between the clock solution file and the bias files. Was noted that for consistency, these should be tied together so that we're not using files from different product lines, because that can create errors for users. It was also asked that we look at updating the APC positions to meters away from millimeters. So we'll look at the possibility of doing that in the file. And we have some new topics that are being discussed to improve the products and for bookkeeping. So a key thing we want to look at is trying to reduce the day boundary discontinuities. And that is something we probably have to work with the clock combination generation on. At the very least, if we can't do that, we'd like to document it. And one of the file updates, one of the updates to the clock file is allowing us to publish this kind of information so that it's something that can be available to the community, and not every user has to figure it out each time they download a new product, download a new file. A discussion also developed as to whether we should have multiple clock solutions. This is kind of a new thing for us to think about, but if we were to consider having an L1, L2 combination, L1, L5, the clock solution would be different. And whether or not we want to present it as two different clocks or have a single clock with two different signal biases is something we have to work out. And that's going to require us to do this work over multiple working groups and work with the ACC and analysis centers. And of course, we want to continue making our aim to push for multi-GNSS, because we know, as Oliver mentioned earlier, that's really something that we want to try to make a priority in the IGS. So recommendations for future work. These are really recommendations back onto the group itself, but there's a lot of collaborative work, it seems, that needs to take place now with clock products into a couple other key working groups, and that's mostly bias and calibration and PPPAR. So if we want to look at doing multiple clock switches between different signal frequency combinations, it really would have to be working with those two groups to make sure that that information is being properly put together and presented. Linking among files for different product consistency is also something we'd want to work on those two groups with. PPPAR and Wuhan are the two we look at if we want to work at reducing the clock day boundary discontinuities, and then eventually we'd want to present a proposal for publication of that additional product. And finally, we'll either be working with multi-GNSS, or if there's a task force that does come out of that, on ensuring that clock products can meet the needs for having all 4 global GNSS in the final product. Right. So I think this sort of summarizes where our group is in terms of the strategic planning for the organization. And this is the final slide that I have for this summary. And does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, thank you for this summary of the clock product working group meeting on Monday. I don't see questions, comments. And thank you, Mike, for your work and your contribution to the community. And Jingui is still not there.
No.
So then, yeah, I think we continue without this report on the PPPAR meeting. And the last report that we expect is from the Central Bureau. I think it's Alison that will give the report.
I will be presenting.
Okay,
Ashley.
Welcome, Ashley.
Right. Oh, all right. Let me get my screen shared. All right, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, it's fine. Please start.
All right. Hi, my name is Ashley. I'm one of the members of the Central Bureau. Some contributors to this presentation is Alex St. Craddock, the director, Maya Ayola Merced, deputy director, and Robert Kachikian, our systems engineer. I just wanted to give a quick summary of the SLM session that was a couple of days ago. So the SLM 2.0 will soon be available on github.com/international GNSS service. And the demo of the session has been recorded and will be available on the website, along with the keynotes and the Splinter outbriefs from today. To follow up on some workshop items for working groups, if you need additional CB assistance with your resolutions, you are welcome to contact us. Also, a reminder to please either upload your second session recommendations to the Google Drive or email them to us. We will be following up with each working group to finalize the recommendations and strategic plan implementation updates. We also plan to organize a hybrid associate member open meeting on Sunday, 11 December, right before the AGU in Chicago, where the working group chairs will have an opportunity to present their updates in person. Right, and just a few reminders on Central Bureau end. If you are a contributing organization to the IGS, feel free to add your contributing organization to our contributing organizations page on our website. Also a reminder to visit our working group pages if you would like to learn more about how to join working groups. And follow us on IGS social media for additional updates, where we will notify here when the presentations and recordings are available, as well as any other IGS updates. And that is all for me. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley, for this report. Are there questions? And we can ask whether all are happy with the recommendations from the various groups, or can we take them to the archive that they can get processed? So this seems not to be the case. So from this, I think that we come towards the end of this workshop. It's the workshop in Boulder has a very long story. The first application to the governing board was in Sydney in February 2016. And at that point, we gave the priority to Paris. And then even the next workshop was not allocated to Boulder, but to Wuhan. So that we met in 2019 in Wuhan. At that point, it was planned to hold this workshop in 2020. As you all know, the phase of virtual meetings started, and we shifted the date for this workshop 2 times, and with the hope to have an in-person meeting. But in February this year, the stream went up into smoke, and because too many uncertainties have been left, and so Boulder has at least the honor to host the first, but hopefully the last, pure online IGS workshop. The success of this workshop is primarily something which comes from the people that attend the workshop and that join the discussions and make opinions and statements that the IGS can further develop. Overall, we have, I think, a very high number of participants. It's again the same order as we had in Wuhan, with nearly 250 participants. They came from 100 organizations, and you see here a map from the regions where the people coming from. Of course, from the time zone, it was most convenient to take part from the American time zone, but we tried at least to find a compromise that all people, all time zones had to suffer at least a bit. And I hope that this worked quite well. So from this, thank you to the participants. Oops, this was not what I expected. I've met the link. Okay. Oh, yeah. So this event was possible because a lot of people prepared it and worked it, and I would start to my thanks with the people behind the scene from the scientific organizing committee, and I think it would be worth to switch on the cameras for these people that you can also see not just the names but also the faces from them. So the chair of the scientific organizing committee was Jan Weiss from UCAR. together with Freddy Blum from UNAFCO, Rui Fernandes from University of Bahia Interior in Portugal, Cheng Gui from Wuhan University, where the previous workshop was hosted, myself and my colleague Arturo Filica. So thank you for the work and bringing together this program. Then not only the scientific organizing committee is important, but of course also the local organizing committee. And there I want to name Freddy Blum again, who is one of the two co-chairs. The other is John Brown, co-chair from UCA. And they have been supported by Melissa Weber, who handled all the Zoom meetings and the logistics. Taunia Medina, also from UNAFCO, who handled the parallel Zoom sessions and did the related administration by the beginning of this week. Jennifer Morrow, who handled the registration and payments for this conference. We should also mention here the UNAFCO Director of Business Affairs and Education and Community, Judy Donato and Donna Charles-Leroy. I hope that I have to pronounce it in French correctly, with the support for the workshop and with the staff availability. And all these people have been strongly supported by the Central Bureau of the IGS, Alison, Myra, Ashley, and Robert. A big thanks to this, and I think we should thank in particular Ashley, who has set up and updated the website and the registration and all the electronic setup very nicely. Thank you for this. This is also a small farewell party here to Myra, who will leave the Central Bureau during the summer because she became a position at the University of Wisconsin. But at least she will keep in touch with our community as a chair of a new pilot project. And this brings Ashley into the new position as secretary of the Central Bureau. But at this point, I also want to thank Myra for their work for the IGS Central Bureau. Thank you, Myra. Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome. Good luck with your new position.
Thank you, Myra.
Okay. And this is nearly the end of this workshop, but I want at least point out some upcoming events. Chengui asked me to show or announce a workshop or symposium that they will have at the Wuhan University on Beidou. This takes place already next week. So who wants to go quickly to China and see the place where we had our 2019 workshop, who can quickly register on the last seconds in this Beidou conference. If you have been careful looking through the web page from the Central Bureau, the recent issue of the newsletter from the IGS was published. And there on the 4th page, you can find a few events announced. The next stop for the tour of the IGS will be organized by Wuhan University with a special focus to Beidou. So it's not a date yet given, but it will be something around August, September, possibly also October. Then Ashley mentioned already that we plan again an open IGS associate member meeting prior the AGU. It's planned for the morning of the 11th of December. And at the AGU, we have 3 sessions that are closely related to our IGS activities. The session on reference frames, then a dedicated session for IGS, where we try to bring together the groups that generate the IGS products with those people that are using them. And what also belongs somehow into our field of interest is the GGOS session. So whether this will really take place as an in-person meeting or in which format, we will see how the future will develop. But at the moment, it looks like that we can meet in Chicago in December this year. In the governing board meeting before the AGU, we will need a new analysis center representative, because as Felix mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I am now the new vice chair of the governing board, and this means that my term as analysis center rep ends. And for the network representation, we may also have a new candidate, but Wolfgang Söhne from BKG is currently in this position, and he can be renewed this time. So, and now the last and possibly most interesting question, if you don't have heard it so far. Let me start to lift the secret by looking back. The IGS had his first workshop in 1993, when they evaluated the results from the test campaign that was held in 92. And the host of this workshop was our institute. We had also the honor, so then the operational service of the IGS started by the 1st of January in 94, and the 10th anniversary was celebrated in 2004 as a symposium, again held at the University of Bern. Then we had the 20th anniversary that was celebrated in Pasadena with a big workshop and a nice picture as the logo. And in 2 years from now, we will celebrate the 3rd decade of our operational service. And because of the traditions, to celebrate these anniversaries in Bern, we invite you to the University of Bern for the next workshop in 2024. So we don't have only our old university building, but with some luck, you will have also the opportunity to have a nice view on the city together with the Alps, given that all goes like expected, that we can have again an in-person workshop. So this is the point where I can close the meeting. And originally one wishes at this point a nice travel home, but we are already at home. So from this I wish you a nice weekend. Oh, what's ongoing there? Okay. It seems that I still have to train a bit to manage these meetings. Okay, then we thank all that have that have organized something, that have made this workshop to a success with their contributions, and have a nice weekend. Good day, good night, good morning, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolf.
Goodbye, everyone. Thanks, Rolf.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
you,
Rolf,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks very
Bye.
much. See you soon. Take care. We miss the beers.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ciao. Bye.